What's going on, people, and welcome to a brand new episode of Too Many Games and Not Enough Time, the podcast where we get to speak to incredible gamers across the globe. Now, once again, if you've come over from TikTok, shout out you. Make sure you hit that subscribe. We are working towards 5K this year. Now, listen. I love this podcast and I love talking to gamers across the globe, but I'm not even gonna lie, I am super gassed right now and super excited to talk to my guest because he went from the kind of funny prom king to the Halloween king. We are talking that Sonic loving, catch him hosting, PS I Love You XOXO, see him on Disney D223. We're talking the one and only Blessing Adeunye Jr. Welcome to Too Many Games, my G.
That was such an excellent intro. I don't think I've ever had an intro as bombastic and excellent as that one. Thank you so much, Mr. Midas.
Fam, I would take that as a hugest compliment because you work with Greg and he's the hypest and biggest guy in the world. But super appreciate you having you on the podcast, but we're gonna get straight into it. We're gonna go straight into games. Now, I've been aware of you for a long time, and I remember the first time seeing you on We Have Cool Friends and having a discussion about Greg, and that's the first time I came across you, and I was just super excited as a kind of funny fan and as a black man to see someone else who looks like me on the pod talking about all of the stuff. And your journey has been immense. Like, you've gone from, like we said, from being part of the community, being a kind of funny, being the prom king, to hosting kind of funny games daily on a daily basis, to actually producing it now, to becoming the host of PS I Love You, which is one of my favorite PlayStation podcasts ever, and gone all the way to Disney D23. When you look back at your journey, like, how do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question. It's kind of insane, you know, like it it doesn't feel like I've done a crazy amount of things, but when I read it on paper, if I was to show a list of things I've gotten to do within the last, even just the last 3.5 years that I worked at Kind of Funny, if I went back in time and showed that list to myself, my brain would explode, right? Like, I wouldn't believe it. But I think for me, right, being who I am in 2023, it just feels like work. It feels like, oh yeah, cool, I just did another thing. I think the things that stand out are getting to host D23. That was a thing that even as I was being asked to do that, immediately I knew how special it was. And, you know, I was very humbled by being reached out to by Disney for that. Being able to get Forbes 30 under 30 was another one that, you know, really struck me as, wow, I can't believe that they're letting me do this. I can't believe that I'm achieving this thing. I never would even conceive that. And so, yeah, I have those moments that remind me about those things. Getting to go to events, you know, I just came back from Summer Game Fest, and getting to actually meet people face to face and talk to, you know, multiple people who listen to the show and see me and listen every day. That is something that, you know, blows my mind. I was hanging out with the voice of Clive the other week from Final Fantasy 16, Ben Starr. And
Ben Starr. Yeah,
like, when I was hanging out with him, you know, the first, like, I had just showed up, you know, like, I got hit up by one of our friends. I was working with them, and they were like, hey, we're gonna grab some drinks if you want to come through. And we're, you know, hanging out, drinking, and we're chatting for about like 45 minutes before I let him know. I'm like, hey, by the way, you know, I'm playing the game right now, and I'm enjoying your performance and all that stuff. And then he's like, dude, I listen to Kind of Funny Games daily every single day. And that blew my mind, right? The fact that this character who's in this game that I love, right, that I'm adoring, is, you know, the voice behind him listens to my voice, right? Like, hears everything that I'm saying every single day. And he described us as the soundtrack to his routine. And that stuff blows my mind whenever I get the opportunity to be reminded that is what our work means to people. I think that's such a special thing. And so I try my best not to take it for granted, but I think the pandemic did such a number on, like, my own perception of my own work, because, you know, from 2020 to late 2022, we were working from home, and I wasn't going to conventions and meeting people and seeing people. And so I felt like I would show up to my bedroom, you know, show up, make a video, make a podcast, put it out into the ether, and then nobody would, like, people would listen to it, right? But I'm not thinking about who's listening to it. And so, yeah, you know, I've really gotten to absorb a lot of that lately, in the last few months especially.
Without using a pun, do you think that was a bit of a blessing, because you actually was able to, it was almost like the school, you was able to Just go there, and all you had to think about is, all right, let's create this great podcast. And even going back, like I watched Cool Friends with today, and even the way you're just speaking with Greg and you span it over and you almost start interviewing him, like the growth of you as a host from when I first saw you on KF to who you are now is a whole nother level. So do you think the pandemic in certain respect actually helped with that? And me as well, like I've worked in the gaming industry for 7 years, bless. I've been able to do things for BAFTAs, stuff like that. I listen to you practically every single day. Like, you are part of the soundtrack of my life as well. So I just wanted to shout you out on screen to say that. You get me?
Yeah, I think for me, pandemic, it's a gift and a curse, right? I think it helped open up certain skill sets. Like I'm able to stream on Twitch pretty competently and pretty regularly because of the skill set I was able to grow during that period. Having to learn how to set up my own setup, right? Having a cam link with a good camera, having an Elgato microphone, being able to set up scenes in OBS and understand how to shift and switch between things, understanding how to host from home and get this all set up. Like this, being able to show up here on your podcast today is easy because I went through the pandemic and having to do all that stuff. And so, yeah, I think in some instances it's a gift, right? I think in a lot, right? I hated working during the pandemic. I absolutely hated it. And part of that was, part of it is the thing that I think applies to everybody, where being at home for that long and being secluded from people for that long is just not good for your mental health. And I definitely felt that a lot of the time because I moved to a new city, right, at the beginning of 2020. I had all these expectations in terms of social life and work life and hosting and what that stuff would look like and traveling and all that stuff, right? And that was immediately taken and thrown out the window. And it was, you're at home, you're showing up, you're doing this thing. And, I think that was, it turned something that I think would have been a lot more exciting and passionate for me into something that did feel like more of a grind and more work some days, right? Especially in that first year where, like I think a lot of people were going through things like depression. A lot of people were going through anxiety. A lot of people, when you're talking about a lot of the movements that were going on in the US and throughout the world regarding police brutality and like the Black Lives Matter movement and all that stuff, there was a lot of real stuff going on. And in my first 6 months of working at Kinda Funny, there was a week where I had to do like a billion guest podcasts because there's not that many black voices in the games media side of the industry, and so I kept getting pulled onto these different shows. And there are definitely many days where I would show up to do KFGD, right, our daily video game news show, and not feel like talking about video games because look out the window, like everything's on fire right now, right? Like everything sucks right now. I'm glad you did. I'm glad you did, because you've been not only a voice for us, but you've been a face and a voice for us. And that's one of the things I was saying about like Paris. Like the reason why I work in the gaming space is because I didn't see enough of us, and seeing you up there, seeing the stuff Paris does, fam, you lot make me so proud. Like I feel proud of you and I didn't even know you. And then when I met you in person, and you were so cool, like you're just such a cool and humble guy, like you don't have any ego to you. So you're such a nice guy, and I love what you're doing, and you represent us so well. And the Blessing Show is literally one of my favorite pieces of content out there. It's an incredible show and you're doing incredible things. But Bless, I'm not going to be gassing you up the whole time you're here. We need to talk some video games. So I know you're a big Sonic fan, and I know you love yourself some FIFA, but I want to talk about little Blessing. I want to know, what are the games that really made you say, I want to be a gamer? What really changed it being from, because as kids, we all just loved video games, but something happens that make us say, oh my gosh, I'm a gamer. Like, I want to do this. Yeah, so for me, it comes in waves where, you mentioned as kids, you just love video games. And that's where it started for me, where one of my first games was Mario 64. And as much as I love to talk up Sonic, and as much as I love to, rep Sonic as a brand and like push that Sonic love, Mario is probably honestly where it's at for me in terms of, a video game that I grew up with, that I absolutely love, that when I'm looking for quality out of a Nintendo game, right? Like Mario's always been there for me. And yeah, Mario 64 was one of my first video games. I got hooked on it. It was the first game I ever beat. And it's such a special game for me. But for me, it was the transition when you talk about, really internalizing how much I love video games. It was a transition from going from the Nintendo 64 to the PlayStation 2. Because I switched sides during that generation, right? My parents came home with the PlayStation 2, and like a couple years of having it, I had a friend named Addison who I would borrow games from him all the time because he had a PS2 before I did, and so like he would send me home with games whenever I'd hang out at his house. And there was one week where he sent me home with 2 games. It was Shadow of the Colossus and Metal Gear Solid 3. And I went home, I played Metal Gear Solid 3 first, and I didn't know what to expect, and what I got blew me away because it was the first time I had ever experienced a game with a story on that level, and I didn't know that video games could hold such a powerful narrative and make me fall in love with the characters and have these story moments that will blow me away, and had a cast of villains that that blew me away. Like there's so many elements of the characters and in the narrative of Metal Gear Solid 3 that I had never experienced before that I think exposed me to that on a whole nother level, and that was so special for me. But then that was the first one I played through it. I loved it. Immediately became one of my favorite games of all time. And then I looked to this next game and I was like, all right, I guess I should try out this Shadow of Colossus game that I'd never heard of before. And I start playing it and I'm like, what is this? This is weird. It has a different energy. And then I get to the first Colossi and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. All right, let's try to fight this thing. And like, as I played through that game, if Metal Gear Solid 3 was the game that exposed me to the fact that video games can have powerful narrative and have powerful stories, Shadow of Colossus was the thing that exposed me to the fact that video games can be beautiful art, right? And have soundtracks that blow me away, and have visuals and art direction that would mean something and that can communicate a thing to you, right? And it would have a story that didn't just have characters and moments and all that stuff, but a story that could be interpreted, and that like I could look at the ending of that game and go, oh, this is what they're trying to say with it, right? And for me, that struck such a chord, and that was so powerful. And those 2 games were probably the back-to-back hits for me that really solidified that how much I loved video games.
That's such a dope example as well, because if we think about how different Nintendo and Sony are as a companies, like if we think Mario 64 basically revolutionized what 3D games were, what 3D platformers, like the way you move, the N64, the Rumble Pack, all of that was a whole nother level, and it changed how games felt. But one thing Nintendo have never really been, they've never been the narrative guys. They want you to experience something and feel wowed. And I remember playing my first proper PlayStation game was Final Fantasy VII, like old school. And that showed me that, oh my gosh, I didn't know you could have narratives like that. And that's something that PlayStation's incredible at, and Kojima's incredible at. And I even think to first playing Metal Gear Solid, and I'm like, what is going on? Like, is this... I didn't know video games could do this. Like, never knew that you could feel these experiences and thing. I'm like, no, I'm actually a gamer now. This isn't just something that I do because when I go to my brethren's house, or when my cousin comes around, we play Street Fighter, or we play ISS because it's the thing to do. Now, this is part of my life. And Shadow of Colossus is one of the games that I actually missed. I never played it until the remasters, and man, that game's sad. Like, really, really sad. And it's like it's very, as in games, like we play the CODs, the Apexes, the Uncharted's, and we're always gunning down and taking down loads of people, and you never really feel any guilt because that's what you do in the game. And I remember playing Shadow of Colossus, like, why does it feel so wrong taking these things down? And I ain't got no clue why, but I'm like, this just doesn't feel right. Like, there's something here that's just weird. So yeah, those are some great choices.
Yeah.
Now, Bless, we've been blessed. I'm going to be throwing out the puns today. Yes. We've been blessed with so many incredible games in the last few generations. And I love my PS5. I think the PS5 is incredible. But the PS4 currently is one of my favorite consoles. I really, really love that console and feel like we had some incredible gems. So I want you to give me 2 games from the PS4 generation that still stick with you to today, that sometimes when you think about it, you're like, these are 2 games that really stick with me.
Wow. Okay, 2 games to the PS4 generation. Nier Automata is one that comes to mind immediately. That's a game that caught me off guard in a similar way that Shadow of Colossus did, but I think for me, it was another one of those games that could only work as a video game when you're talking about what it sets up with having to do these multiple playthroughs and get these multiple endings to get the full story, in the way in which the game structures itself as you do this first playthrough and you think you're getting this basic story of, oh man, I'm this android that's taking back the Earth from the robots, and I'm gonna do this and I'm gonna beat the game and win. You beat the game, you get to the first ending, and it tees you up to play it again, and you get the different perspective from another character, right? And then you continue playing, it then shifts perspective to another character, and you're getting these different angles of the same story that totally recontextualize the way in which the story, like the first story you got, works, right? And for me, that was such a special way to tell a story. But then also the music of it is, God, the soundtrack is one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard in my life. Like it's maybe my number 1 video game soundtrack of all time. It is a gorgeous score. The art direction and world, I think, is beautiful and really really unique, and it stands out. And like the dialogue and the somberness, it's similar to Shadow of Colossus, where it's, man, this game is sad. It's a sad video game, but man, does that game go for it and have a lot to say about humanity and what makes us human, and philosophy, and it has so much to say on subject matter that I feel like we typically don't get out of video games, and I think it does a good job of trying to tackle those in thoughtful and inventive ways. And so yeah, Nier Automata sticks out to me from the PS4 generation. And then what's another one?
I'm gonna let you think about it for a minute, and I agree with you. Nier is spectacular, and it's funny because like I'm loving Final Fantasy 16 right now, and the combat is amazing, and I don't really hear people talk about how incredible Nier's combat was. Like, it was so revolutionary, and even being able to like add parts into your chip, so just like similar to with FF16, if you're not very good at this and you need like auto dodges and stuff, like they had all of that. And bless, when I heard, you gotta replay the game again to get a different story ending, and I'm like, I don't have time for this. What do you mean? But it's so smart, because each time you're playing, you're basically playing a different story, and then the story continues, and it makes you care about robots and round-faced people and all of them thing there, and you're like, they did everything they needed to do in that game. They did it right.
1000%. Yeah, so trying to figure out the second game is tough, because I'm like narrowing down.
Do you know what? It's fine. You know what? I'm gonna leave you with just the one, just because we're a short form podcast. We don't have much time left.
I'll shout out one. I'll say Bloodborne. I'll just say Bloodborne.
Bloodborne. Okay. See, I wish. Blessing. I can't parry for anything. I am so trash at parrying. Every Bloodborne, Souls game, all of them, like I always miss the mark with them because I just can't parry. All right, really quickly before you leave me, we've had a super incredible year. Like this year is insane with games. Just without thinking about it too much, if you had to pick your top 3 game of the year contenders so far, what would it be?
Zelda Tears of the Kingdom for sure. Street Fighter 6 and Final Fantasy 16.
Exactly the same as mine. The same as mine. Tears of the Kingdom, immaculate. Street Fighter 6. I'm a big Street Fighter guy. I'm not the sickest. Against my friends, I can bruck them up, but I know a lot of professional people and they just make me look stupid. And it's really good to see that. And the good thing that I love about Zelda, Street Fighter, and Final Fantasy 16, they're bringing in so much new people. And I think it's really important. Even someone like you, who's not like the Final Fantasy guy, FF7 remake, bringing you into a fold and this kind of making you love it is dope. Bless, really quickly before you go, I just want to talk a little bit about the Blessing Show. And the Blessing Show is an incredible piece of content that you do on Kind of Funny, and you get to do really different subject matters. And the one that touched my heart was all about black hair. So you spoke about the importance of black hair in video games, why it's not represented, and the video went off. It's had such a great response. And for me as a black man, like, that really meant so much to me, being able to say, raw, look, he's on a platform where he can speak to people and he's representing us in the way we need to be. What was the thought process of doing that, and how did you feel actually bringing it to the Kind of Funny squad to be like, look, this is what I want to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, for that last part, right? Like the Blessing Show, I get to pretty much talk about whatever, you know, like really it comes down to me and Roger and what we want to talk about, and a video we feel like making. So like, as long as we have an agreement on what the subject matter should be, then we get to do whatever we want. But yeah, I think for me, the thought process on that one was just it's something that I've noticed, and it's something that I think so many people have noticed, right? Especially black folks, of, wow, the hair options aren't great, right? And that's the thing I've complained about on Twitter over the years multiple times. And there was a point where I was like, you know what? If I'm complaining about it so much, let's just do a whole script, right? Let's break down why this is important, why this isn't being treated the right way, right? How to get better black hair options in video games, and really deep dive. And I think I think the big thing was understanding what we have with Kind of Funny and the reach that we have with our audience, but then also what we can do with our set and the video wall and making a polished video. And so, I tried to do the best with the platform that we have, and I think that came through. I had gone through and I'd watched videos of people on YouTube, right, doing video essays about similar topics, but like none of them had that same level of polish and the same like set and stuff. And so I was like, you know what, let's do it, let's make it happen. And it took a while. Like, that was the longest script it took me to write, just for how many different things I wanted to touch on and how rock solid I wanted the script to be. I wanted it to be a thing where you can't pick it apart in ways and like have my arguments topple down, right? I wanted to be rock solid in every single one of my points and my arguments. And so that took a little bit of time, on top of like making it engaging and entertaining and having jokes and having interviews and integrating it all. But yeah, there was a lot that went into it. And, Roger knocked it out of the park with his editing as well. And, I think that was one that we're all very happy with in terms of how it came together and the final product of it. And yeah, shout out to everybody that's watched it. Shout out to you for hyping it up as well. Like, thank you so much for watching it and enjoying it. I'm very happy that it struck a chord, and it continues to strike a chord with people.
Yeah, that is sick. And shout out Roger. Do you know what? On the last video, I actually shouted him out in the comments because I'm like, you know what? I'm always bigging up Bless, but Roger's editing is on point. Like, the edits of the Blessing Show are immaculate. Bless, do you know what? I could have spoke to you all day, but we're only a short form podcast. Once again, thank you so much for coming on Too Many Games. I really, really appreciate it. As a fan, it's been immaculate being able to see your journey and see your growth. And I'm super excited to see where you elevate and the next level that you get to. I really appreciate you guys having me on Kind of Funny Games Daily recently. That meant so much to me as a fan. And yeah, man, just keep doing incredible things. And you lot need to go and watch the Blessing Show, because if you're not, you're sleeping, fam. What are you doing? Like, you need to watch it. Blessing, if you want to send people to come and find you, where they going?
Yeah, of course, my content's over there on youtube.com/kindoffunnygames. But if you want to follow me on Twitter, @Blessing Jr. is where you can find me.
@Blessing Jr. And it's simple as that. And thank you so much for staying to the end of the video. You are the MVPs. Remember, we are working towards 5K by the end of the year. Make sure you let us know in the comments below what you want to see out of black hair in games. Tell me what you want to see, because I've seen enough of dreads. I've seen enough cane rolls. You get me? I want to see more baby hairs and them thing there. Tell me what you want in the comments below. I've been Mr. Midas. He's been Blessing Adejulia Jr. And you've been the MVPs. We out of here. Peace.